Thank you, Joan. Good morning, everyone. I was trained as a city planner, but never practiced. 40 years ago, I started to work with business and have never stopped. 7 minutes on the role of business in all of this. If you're a business leader and you're not aware of sustainable development, I think you're suffering from some form of brain damage, to put it crudely. Everyone who currently runs a major business in this world has grown up in the period since 50 years ago we first saw the Earth from outside. So my message is simple. The Sustainable Development Goals are potentially great for business, but only if we engage the right sort of business leaders. And there's a bell curve with business leaders. So there are wonderful people like Paul Polman, who we all like to admire at Unilever. And then there's this huge, great sweep of business leaders, some of whom understand what's going on and are trying to do the right thing, right the way through to people who probably have some sense of what they should do, but are absolutely determined to do nothing until the last possible moment. And then you've got people who are categorically evil. I'm not going to talk about those folk. Instead, I'm going to talk about the leadership group that is increasingly embracing the goals. As various speakers have already said, the COP agreement, the Paris Agreement, is increasingly seen by leadership companies as the framework for the future of market growth. Some of you may have seen in 2015 the Harvard Business Review front cover story on their latest leadership rankings. Fascinating, because for the first time, 20% of the rankings went to environment, social, and governance factors. What happened? Jeff Bezos of Amazon plummeted from number 1 to number 87, and Lars Rabin Sorensen of Novo Nordisk came up into the number 1 slot. We live in a world where the understanding of what leadership represents is changing. And many of you will have seen, just in recent weeks, BlackRock's CEO, Larry Fink, writing his letter to shareholders and saying, if you are not addressing these sorts of issues seriously and over time, BlackRock will increasingly disinvest from you. But Peter was just saying he had a single point. If I have one single point to leave you with, it is that we are not here dealing with an incremental agenda. It has incremental components, but is fundamentally exponential. And we're at one of these inflection points on many of the issues that Paula and others have been talking about this morning. And I would say Sustainable Development Goals, I love them, but if you read them as incremental goals, you're delusional. You're mistaken, because in many ways they are exponential goals. So if we're talking about, for example, no poverty or zero hunger, even by the 2070s, that's an exponential set of goals. By 2030, it's really a rather more of a challenge than I think most of us think. A couple of slides on a very interesting study that launched recently from a group called Rethink X, Jamie Arbib's group, looking at the future of transportation, mobility, the oil industry, and so on. And the image there, the roadkill image, is from the front cover of The Economist, talking about the future fate of the internal combustion engine. I'm not going to read through the bullet points. I'm simply making a point that Rethink X made, which is if you look out to 2030, the timescale by which we're meant to deliver the Sustainable Development Goals, we are likely to see a 50% increase in passenger miles traveled, but a 70% decrease in the revenues available from all of that travel. The implications for the automotive sector and for the oil industry are absolutely profound. Now, even if they're out by an order of magnitude, that is still a pretty major issue. So if you're a business leader and you're not paying attention to some of these underlying dynamics in technology, in business models, and in markets, you're making quite a fundamental error. Some of you, perhaps most of you, have read the Business for Sustainable Development Commission report on the left, Better Business, Better World. You will have seen their market analysis, 60 hotspots linked to the global goals. In just 4 of those sectors, so cities and energy and materials are in there, markets predicted $12 trillion a year by 2030. Again, who knows? But one of the riders in the report is that could be 2 to 3 times greater if we act in good time and good order. One of the things we've been doing recently is looking at some of the disruptive, exponential innovators in different parts of the world. And interestingly, they're no longer just in very small startup companies. They're in big companies. You see Francesco Staracci, the CEO of Enel in the middle. You see Patrick Thomas of Covestro Materials Company. They're all talking about the Sustainable Development Goals as fundamental to what they do. Peter Diamandis of the X Prize Foundation in the middle there is somebody who talks about the need now not simply to do 1% change a year or even 10% change a year, but to go 10x, to basically try and multiply tenfold the positive impact of what our businesses are doing. This is the last slide. It's very simple. Generation Foundation, Al Gore's investment firm, basically saying in a recent white paper that the sustainability revolution, which is basically summed up in the Sustainable Development Goals, is proceeding, or likely to proceed, at the scale of the industrial and agricultural revolutions, but at the speed of the information revolution. That's the opportunity space. If you're a business leader and you're not paying attention, good luck. And in terms of commitments, on Friday of this week, we have an event here in London with the Greater London Authority and with Innovate UK, looking at the ways in which government can help smaller and medium-sized enterprises come up these sorts of curves. I'll leave it there. Thanks very much indeed for your attention.